Good morning. It is Wednesday, May 20th, 2020, and we are gathered here today to discuss friendship. I'm going to give a little talk here that plugs in with the weekly talks that I've given for the last few weeks, and so if this is all new to you, there's lots of good stuff that you'll be able to dig into if you want more. So right now we're talking about the importance of friends in our lives and the importance of these relationships that we have with other beings and how we can honor those friendships and so they become the support that they're really meant to be in our lives. I said at the end of last week that in order for us to be a good friend to others, we have to learn how to be a good friend to ourselves. And this is really, really true, because as we look at the principles of friendship, the number one principle of friendship is essentially the golden rule. You know, everything that I teach, really, and I believe all of the real true teachings, they're simple. They're innate, because all of this is about coming back to our humanness. It's coming back to our true nature. And so anything that we find that it's very complicated or you have to be like really, really advanced to understand it, to me, that right there already kind of smells a little fishy, right? Whereas the teachings that I'm really drawn to remind us that we're already hooked up for this. And that's true of the essence of friendship, right? Which is this golden rule, which is just so simple, and it shows up in all teachings all over the world. And and in some spaces it seems like it doesn't even need to be said, but we are going to say it, and we do need to say it in the world that we live in now, which is essentially the golden rule, right? Treat others as you would treat yourself. What that really is an extension of selfhood to others. It says, I can really only, this is going to be a theme for us today, I can really only experience my experience. And yet I can experience that other beings around me have an inner life of their own, that other beings around me are having their own experience. And so even though my hookup means I feel my hands, I see through my eyes, I speak with my particular voice, even though that's true, I don't have to then start to imagine that others are less worthy or less sensitive, or right, that I imagine that we're on a par somehow. So I'm extending selfhood to you. By that, I'm also extending my values to you, and we're going to dig into our values. That's coming up a little later in a few weeks. But I've been talking a lot about my values in the last few weeks, which kind of essentially boil down to love and truth. If I believe that I'm worthy of love, I then, to extend selfhood to you, to be a friend to you, the golden rule says you also are worthy. If I want the truth, if I want to see things the way that they are in my relationships, I'm not going to obscure the truth from others. Right? So simple, so simple. But the essence of friendship and the essence of right relationship, which was something I talked a lot about last week in last week's talk, the essence of right relationship, which is really just friendship, it's really respect. And the reason why it's so important to be able to be a good friend to oneself is because if I don't respect myself, I'm going to give you the same. If I'm delusional and lying to myself, I'm going to lie to you too. That's just how I'm hooked up, right? That's how I'm working. If I am not honoring myself, then I can't extend that honoring fully to you, right? And so it's not just, it's not like this, it's not just sentimental. None of this is actually just sentimental. All of these teachings they're true. It works, right? So we don't love ourselves because we're all like trying to learn a culture of self-care right now. We're learning to love ourselves because we actually cannot extend to others what we don't have. And this is why we meditate every day. And this is why we do our practices. This is why we bring ourselves back into health. And I've talked a lot recently about my own experience of sort of having an inner battle. And these inner battles, the inner lack of, if we don't trust ourselves, right? If we feel at war, this is going to end up radiating out in our exchanges. Even if we manage to be very controlled about what we say or how we express ourselves, the energy of it, right? We just did this guided meditation. Where we cultivated different energies of care for different friends who came in with kind of different situations. And just sitting in meditation, that to me is the easiest way to begin to realize that we are always expressing ourselves energetically, even if we're not speaking or acting, even if we think we're keeping our anger or our frustration or our sadness, even if we think we're separating ourselves off from others and protecting them from it, we are not. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't really try to be kind, and we should, that's not all what I'm saying, but I am saying that we ultimately have to go in and do our inner work. We have to ultimately go in and build a trusting relationship with self. We have to look at the places that are at war and heal them for ourselves. Because that ends up being the gift. I remember a couple of meditations with my teacher in person, which I don't see him very often in person. And I remember the feeling. I can feel it now. The feeling of just being in his presence. We were doing silent meditation. He didn't say a word. And I could feel his love and trust and truth. And to be in the room with it was such a huge teaching. And it helped me have confidence in all of these practices. And even though there are lots of people in the world who may not get what we're doing here, it reminded me that what we're doing here is so, so important. And that just walking down the street, you can be a friend to life. You can be spreading joy and truth and love, and people don't have to know it. We don't have to then give you a parade about it, right? And for the enlightened being, that feeling of walking through the world that way becomes enough. Next week, we're going to talk about fear, and I have some really beautiful quotes and texts that we'll look at, little pieces we'll look at about this. But basically, they say in these teachings we're going to talk about that what fear does is it creates enemies. And that the enlightened being is the one who's walking through the world with no enemies. And so the enlightened being gets the freedom of living in a world of love because they have looked at all their own stuff. And they have learned that having enemies doesn't hurt our enemies. It only hurts us. It hurts everybody, but we have to live with that suffering. So the teaching that I'm going to give you now, I'm going to go a little deeper into the teaching that I offered at the beginning, or sorry, at the end of last week's talk, but I kind of rushed through. I was feeling rushed, and I just gave you a little graze of that. So I'm going to go a little deeper, and it connects to the meditation that we just did. If you're watching the video, I recommend the meditation. I'll make sure you get a link to that. That's really us experiencing what I'm about to talk about. This is a sutra from the Yoga Sutras. It's a famous sutra, 133, from the first pada or book. And as I said last week, it comes in a section. It comes at the beginning of a section that's all about meditation. How do we practice meditation? And this teaching is often contextualized by talking about how to be in relationships, which is why I brought it in for friendship. But really, it's in this section, and it's really talking about how we can be in relationship with ourselves, right? So how to be a good friend, as I said before, is simple and innate. It's this golden rule to give to others what we feel like we would like and what we deserve. And one of the aspects of being a good friend is being able to shift gears with our friends. Some friendships may have certain aspects to the collaboration, to the friendship that means that you do this kind of interrelating more than others. But in any case, a friendship, like I've said before, it's where, we take turns being sources for each other, right? Being the support person, and we take turns being the one who needs a little extra support. And we do this kind of dance, and we go back and forth. And so we need that adaptability. And this teaching, this sutra, is actually, in a sense, about that adaptability. And in a sense, so to be friends with somebody else means I'm going to be able to meet them where they are. That's kind of what I'm saying. And that is the essence of right relationship. That every relationship is a dynamic, and every being in that relationship gets to bring what they bring. So I don't bring I don't bring like purple and sparkles, and my friend says, "Oh no, you should have worn black, and you should have done something different." The essence of this teaching is when someone brings something, we bring an appropriate match. We offer an appropriate match. And I typed into the chat box this teaching for those who are watching live, if you want to take a little look at that. I am going to go ahead and chant this again. The chanting last time was a little bit funky. So I'm going to chant it now, and then I'll go through the teaching and the Sanskrit. You'll learn a little Sanskrit today. All right, so here is Sutra 133. Maitrī karuṇā mudito pekṣaṇām sukha duhkha puṇyā apuṇyā viśayānām bhāvanāta citta prasādanam. And so the way that this breaks down is he gives us four experiences that we'll meet in the world. And then he gives us four responses. The four experiences that we're going to meet in the world are in a way, they can kind of encapsulate like you can kind of fit almost any experience into one of these buckets. So, okay, that's useful, right? That's useful. And then the 4 responses are all different ways of being loving. This is helpful in and of itself for me as a teaching, because I think that as somebody who was raised in a culture where little girls are supposed to always be nice and and just as somebody who, because of my own setup, I was like people pleaser to the max. It's really helpful for me to hear there are different ways of loving, and some of them aren't gooey and aren't, just like full of smiles and rainbows, right? That's not always actually the way that love needs to love us. And, this is about being a good friend to others. It's about being a good friend to yourself. But in a way, this is kind of cool. What we're really learning how to be friends with are these 4 different types of experience. So we're learning how to become a friend to life. And we're learning how to become a friend to our inner experience, which is variable. Again, just like our friendships, they may come in dressed in purple, they may come in dressed in black, and it's not my job to tell them they should have worn something different. Same with life, right? I am feeling this right now. I used to say, I shouldn't feel that. I don't want to feel that. Push it down, right? Or somehow avoid it, or distract myself, or pretend it's not true. This teaching, all of these teachings, all of the meditation practice is saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. How do you know this isn't your friend? And if everything is your friend, it's not about repressing anything. It's not about avoiding anything. And it's not about attaching to some things. It is really about, how do I meet this? So when we experience sukha, ease or joy, the idea is that we then want to respond with this particular flavor of love called maitrī, or friendliness. It's a welcoming. It's like sukha, ease, happiness, contentedness. Sukha is really an embodied state. It's that feeling of comfort, in the body. And of course, we know that there are challenges to this. In the next section, where we talk about fear, I'm going to introduce you guys to the klesha, which I know a lot of you guys have experienced before. But this is really, really powerful, where we're going to learn how sukha often makes us feel attachment. And maitrī is not attachment. Friendliness, it's welcoming, but it's not attached. And so when you experience sukha inside of yourself, notice how you respond to it and see if you can be welcoming and friendly, but the way a friend would. You can come and go, sukha. I'm not going to trap you here. The duhkha is, we tend to respond a little differently to duhkha, right? Duhkha is discomfort, and we all experience this in the body. It's very real. Sukha and duhkha are real human experiences. And duhkha, we want to meet with compassion, karuṇā. Again, you just look for yourself. How do you normally respond when there's suffering? And maybe it's a little different depending on who's suffering or how they bring it to you. But again, always looking back, how do I respond to my own suffering? And discomfort. I should distinguish, I tried to do this and I just messed it up, but I try to distinguish duhkha. I try not to actually translate it as suffering, because duhkha is really discomfort or pain, which it's up to me whether or not I decide that that's suffering. Okay, and I'll talk about a little bit about that now. The way that I look at sukha and duhkha is as one part of one process. or experience, which isn't being an embodied human. Every single person I know experiences both sukha and dukkha throughout the day. And what I want to offer to you, especially as we've been talking a lot in the last couple of weeks about pairs of opposites, yin and yang, masculine and feminine. Here we are again, sukha and dukkha can seem like opposites, but the same is true. Just as yin and yang are actually part of one whole, sukha and dukkha are part of one whole. And if we could start to see that, it's actually really helpful. It's really helpful. In the klesha, when we talk about them, he tells us that dukkha can be a trap because it brings about aversion. We want to avoid dukkha. And so I might see someone suffering on the street and I might judge them because that protects me from them. Judgment is one of our culture's favorite ways to protect ourselves from other people's dukkha. It doesn't work, turns out. But this is really helpful. If we can see that sukha and dukkha are actually they always have a beginning, middle, and end. They're ephemeral. This is a concept I introduced last week of nitya, meaning eternal, and anitya, meaning ephemeral, passing. Sukha and dukkha are always ephemeral. They're always coming and going. There are some concepts of things like ananda, bliss. There are these sort of these different states which you could enter into, but sukha is passing. And the way that I would love for you to look at sukha and dukkha is as just essentially your body giving you information. And if you can stay out of the story of sukha and dukkha and simply just meet the experiences. Oh, this is a feeling of ease. Can I bring some maitrī into the equation? What does that feel like? Oh, I'm uncomfortable. Be it my stomach hurts or my heart feels broken, whatever it is, this is uncomfortable, right? This is something that it doesn't feel easy. And that's true. Can I meet it with compassion? Can I be really sweet with this? Stay out of the stories. The stories is where we get into, oh, I'm feeling this ease because I did such a good job yesterday. I went to sleep at the right time and I have to, I don't know, whatever it is, right? Say the stories about it. Oh, I'm suffering because I'm a bad person and this is my comeuppance. And that actually is just getting in the way of giving yourself or whoever's in the room love. So it's about being with the experience. And if you can remember that these are one, dukkha and sukha are actually one, it'll help you come back, get out of the story and come back to the feeling and see if you can cultivate a response of love. Now, puṇyā and apuṇyā are also ephemeral. Puṇyā means success and apuṇyā means failure. Or, puṇyā is like doing a good deed and apuṇyā is like doing a bad deed. Puṇyā would be being in line with our sources and and our values and living in the way that we want to be living, and apuṇyā is when we fall off. But actually, if sukha and dukkha are kind of the embodied version of ephemeral and sort of process, it's a process. Puṇyā and apuṇyā are as well. I have learned more from my apuṇyā than I have from my puṇyā, or maybe I've learned equally from both, but I don't know who I would be without all of the mistakes I've made. I'm not going to go too deep into this today, but I've got lots of material about how challenging my last year has been. And I'm in this big period of seeing for myself the ways that I have kept myself out of alignment from truth. And I've seen all the ramifications of it and all the ways that I have spread not love and not truth, and all the ways that I've lived that way. And it's been the most enlightening year of my life. There's been a lot of duhkha, you know, as I observe my apuṇya. So if we can start to see that, like, look at any good thing you've ever done. If I feel good about this talk and I get up and I'm like, oh, I did a good job, right? I gave a talk a few weeks ago that some of you know I didn't even post publicly because I was like, this is so bad, you know. And I remember like going into that and learning so much. And so a good talk this week is just as much a result of a bad talk that I've given before as it is any of my virtues. Okay. So once again, we have these kinds of ways of relating when we see virtue or non-virtue. And we want to meet virtue with mudita, joy. I want to actually be able to honor my successes and yours. We need to be able to celebrate. Mudita is like celebration. We have gestures in our culture that do this. This is like an amplification gesture, you know? And Lee asked about pekṣaṇām, and so I'm going to talk a little bit more about pekṣaṇām. So apuṇya, pekṣaṇām is equanimity, and that's what we want to meet. That's what we want to meet apuṇya with, non-virtue. It's of all of the flavors of love, the one that I think I've had to learn the most, probably because of what I was saying before about being a people pleaser and me almost being kind of addicted to the feeling of having other people go, well, thank you. Oh, but pekṣaṇām, sometimes we don't get a thank you for, you know? And it is that ability just to sit and be with what is. At the very beginning of the talk, I said we extend to our friends the same gifts that we want extended toward us, toward ourselves. And pekṣaṇām will come naturally when we realize that everybody's on their own journey. Everybody's in their own process. And when pekṣaṇām is not possible is when we are triggered, when we feel emotional charge around something, when we feel fear. Again, we're going to talk a lot about fear in the next couple of weeks, and we'll get into this. Kristen's asking, is it the same thing as holding space? Yes. I think it's all holding space. It's all holding space. But this is a particular kind of holding space where we allow the space to be enough, and we're not putting so much into the space. We're not injecting so much into the space. So much more I wanted to say. I'm going to speak for 2 more minutes here. About this other piece, and it's actually going to help us understand pekṣaṇām. Okay, so I said that I would talk about communication, and we'll have to talk more about it next week, but I'm just going to lay this out. So, okay, when we practice these 4 flavors of love, when we practice the ability of giving somebody else autonomy and giving their journey space, pekṣaṇām is really us saying, I am not in charge of your journey. I'm not even in charge of my journey. I'm along on my own ride, and you're along on your ride. And what we can do, and this is such a huge part of holding space, which Kristen asked about, what we can do is sit in a space of trust, connect to your sources, connect back to your trust, get back to your equilibrium, and model that for them, and create, you do create an energy of equilibrium when you do that. And what this makes possible is authentic communication. Authentic communication. And this is how we do right relationship, which is actually just an innate thing that's happening all the time. This is how we do it. Here's how communication works in 4 simple steps. Okay, 1, you have to have awareness of your inner state. How am I responding? How am I feeling? And so often we take our inner state and we project it onto somebody else. And that is taking away their journey. That's taking away their autonomy. That's not actually giving them selfhood. Yeah? But, okay, so step 1 of authentic communication is I need to be aware of my inner state and take responsibility for that. 2, I need awareness of the other. So awareness of self is 1, awareness of other is 2. Awareness of the other means they can only have access to their inner needs. That's their job. So I keep my responsibility and I give them back theirs. They're in charge of their inner state. Okay, so the first 2 pieces are awareness of self, awareness of other. The second 2 pieces of authentic communication are about expression. I am responsible for expressing from my inner world to you. You can't access my inner world directly. So I have to learn how to express. The awareness and the expression are each journeys that each of us has to go on. And then, of course, there's the other piece, and that's the piece of listening. They're in charge of awareness of their inner state, and they're in charge of expressing it to you. You are not in charge of extracting it from them. They're in charge of expressing it to you. But what we can do, and this is holding space, what we can do and should do is the same thing we do for our practices. We show up and we let go. We show up, we make the space, and we make the time to be with whoever it is, whether they've misstepped or they're celebrating. We make time. And then we listen. When something comes up in my inner world that needs to be expressed, I listen to that and I'll express it, right? And when you're expressing something from your inner world, I will listen. All right, that's all that we can do for today. But there's more. There's always more, and luckily we've got more time. I can take just a question or 2 right now, and then I'm going to open the founders room, and some of us will go over there and just do our little weekly check-in. So yeah, any questions about this talk?